Welcome once again to Learning Literature with Sergio. It is a privilege to come your way with another lesson on literature. Today our lesson will look at the topic setting, and it is my hope that by the end of the lesson, learners will be able to understand the concept of setting in literature, explain the term setting in their own understanding, identify the types of setting, state at least 2 instances of setting, explain at least 3 functions of setting, and lastly, state at least 3 key elements to consider when analyzing a setting. But before we begin the lesson, I would want us to note that all good literature uses setting. There is no literary work or story that can exist without the use of setting. Time and place are key elements of stories, and writers cannot do away with them. That is the main reason why setting is an important element in literature. To begin with, what is a setting? Setting can be explained as the physical environment that creates the action and the time of day or year. The environment of the story can be made up of the physical location, social and cultural, or the climatic condition of the environment. The time of the story as well can cover many areas, such as the time of the day or year, characters' time of life, and even the historical period in which the story is set. Setting therefore aids the reader to visualize or see the action of the story, and consequently adds credibility and authenticity to the story. So it is through the setting that readers are able to visualize the action of the story, and setting also places value on the story, that is, adding credibility and authenticity to the story. Setting also helps in creating and sustaining the very illusions of life to provide what we call verisimilitude. Verisimilitude here means nearness to reality. It is the setting that helps in creating and also sustaining the illusions, the imaginations of life, the thoughts of writers, and bringing it close to reality. So writers imagine how life would be or how life is in their text, and because writers have the ability to create in the world of art, to make it seem real, they do that with the help of what? Setting. It is through the use of setting that writers are able to bring their story close to reality. And setting helps in creating and sustaining these very illusions of life. What are the types of setting? 1. Backdrop setting, and 2. Integral setting. So these are the 2 main types of setting that we are going to look at. So with the backdrop setting, it is basically a type of setting that is not considered as an important element of the storyline, because the writer's focus is mainly on the message or the lesson that is being delivered. With this type of setting, there is little or no necessary relationship to either the plot or the characters. So with the backdrop setting, there is no interconnectedness or relationship or connection that exists between the plot and the setting, or the character and the setting. That is why it is considered an unimportant element within that particular kind of story. Stories with backdrop setting are deemed timeless and can happen at any point in history or anywhere. So with the type that we are discussing, that is the backdrop setting, it is seen as timeless. It is considered as timeless. For instance, we have fairy tales, and with fairy tales, it can happen at any environment. It can exist in any time, because the focus is not on the location or the setting, but rather the message that is being sent, or the message that is being delivered. So that is what we term the backdrop setting. The second type of setting that is classified as integral setting is a type that is considered as an important element of the story. So with this, it means that the time and place are important to the story, and they have intimate connection with the meaning of the entire story, and one cannot understand the plot of the story without the setting. So with the integral, it means that that type of setting is crucial or important to the story, and one cannot understand or derive meaning out of the entire story without considering the setting. And this means that a good critic needs to be concerned with this type of setting. Now let's look at the functions of setting. There are different functions of setting, but we are going to concentrate on these 4 functions of setting. And they are setting as an antagonist, setting as a means of revealing character, setting as a background for action, and setting as a means of reinforcing the theme of the story. What do we mean by setting as an antagonist? Setting can function as an antagonist, an opposing force to the protagonist, in that in stories where we have conflict between characters and nature, then nature becomes the causal agent or the antagonist. So if the setting, that is nature in the story, is against the character or the protagonist, therefore the setting becomes antagonist. Setting functions as an antagonist. Secondly, setting can function as a means of revealing a character or characters. Very often, the way in which a character perceives the setting and the way he or she reacts to it will tell the reader more about the character and his or her state of mind than it will about the setting itself. So the character's perception about a particular environment or time within the story reveal or can reveal to us the nature or the state of mind of the character. An author can also clarify and reveal character by deliberately making certain a metaphoric or symbolic extension of the character. So if setting is a metaphoric or symbolic extension of the character, then the setting is functioning as a means of revealing the character. So the character or the author has been able to use setting in an attempt to reveal the nature of the character. Thirdly, setting as a background for action. Everything happens somewhere, and we cannot say that a story can exist without setting. I made this statement before the discussion. I said that all good literatures exist because they have setting. So setting is very important in stories because they serve as background for action. Lastly, setting as a means of reinforcing theme. Setting can also be used as a means of reinforcing or clarifying the theme of a novel or a story. For example, if the setting of a particular story is within the colonial times, there is one thing that we cannot do away with when we are discussing setting. That is the relationship between setting and language. So these are the two main intentions of writers whenever they are writing and creating their setting. They intend to make readers see or feel the setting that they are creating. And this can be done only through the use of language. In that, if the writer intends to make readers see the setting, then he is supposed to give details of the setting, and the language that the writer would use should be concrete and sensory, because it is through concrete language and sensory language that writers can use to help readers see their setting. Concrete in the sense that when readers experience this kind of setting, because the language is concrete, they can visualize or see. And if the language is sensory, it helps them to also see, because if it appeals to any of their senses, then the writer has been able to achieve that particular intention. Therefore, more and more details will be given in order to render the setting more real. So it is the descriptions that the writer will give to that particular setting that will help the readers see what the setting is. However, if the writer intends to make readers feel the setting, then the writer's responsibility is only to appeal to the reader's imagination and emotions through connotative and suggestive language. So with seeing, the writer is using language that is concrete and sensory, but with feeling, the writer uses language that is connotative and suggestive. So when we talk about the connotative and the suggestive kind of language, then it means that the writer would want the readers to have their own interpretation or manipulate the poetic qualities of language to elicit from the reader the desired and appropriate response. The desired and appropriate response. But often writers would want readers to both feel and see the setting. Thus, he uses language to bring about both effects at the same time. So mostly we find writers having both intentions in their writing. That is to make readers see and at the same time feel their setting. And in that sense, they would have to use language that is concrete, sensory, connotative, and suggestive to bring about both effects at the same time. So that is the relationship that exists between setting and language. Lastly, we will look at the sub-area analyzing setting. Analyzing setting. When critics are analyzing setting, then their focus is mainly on the integral kind of setting. The integral kind of setting. So there are questions that readers are supposed to ask themselves in order to analyze the setting appropriately. 1. What is the story's setting as regards place and time? What is the story's setting as regards place and time? How does the writer go about establishing setting? How does the writer go about establishing setting? Is the setting important? If so, what is its function? So, if the setting is important, then we are talking about the integral kind of setting. And it is only the integral kind of setting that we consider the setting important. And if it is important, then what has the writer done as regards its function? Its function. Then lastly, is the setting appropriate? Is the setting appropriate? What is the appropriateness of the setting? So these are 4 questions that critics can ask themselves when analyzing a setting. So we bring our lesson to an end, and our lesson basically was on the topic setting, and we understood that setting can be explained as physical environment that creates the action and time of the day. Setting aids readers to visualize the action of the story and also helps in creating and sustaining the very illusions of life to provide what we call verisimilitude. We have 2 main types of setting, which are backdrop setting and integral setting. With backdrop setting, we understood that the setting is not that important because the writer's focus is on the lesson or the message being delivered. And with integral setting, it's the type of setting that is having or that has intimate connection with the meaning of the entire story, and one cannot understand the plot of the story without the setting. So integral setting means that the setting is important to the story. Then we looked at the functions of setting, and we realized that setting can function as an antagonist, function as a means of revealing characters, function as a background for action, means of reinforcing the theme, and lastly, or last but not least, we looked at the relationship that exists between setting and language, and we understood that the writer's intention in writing is to make the readers feel or see the setting. And if he wants the readers to see, then he needs to use language that is concrete and sensory. If he wants the readers to feel, then the language will be connotative and suggestive. And lastly, we talked about analyzing a setting. Thank you very much, and don't forget to subscribe